This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we talk about We Bought a Zoo with Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson. Some of our greatest adventures begin in our darkest trauma. We get to decide whether to follow the story of safety and security or the story of mystery and miracles. We realize that facing our worst trials takes courage. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me from Hotlanta is my buddy Britt Mooney. Hey, man.
What is up?
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. As we talked about before we recorded, I'm grieving and praying and troubled by a lot of stuff that's going on in Afghanistan right now because we have some personal connections through our ministry that I work with and for, that I'm a part of, and the coffee company. We have some connections to some missionaries and some of the Afghan people. So that are involved in a lot of that stuff. So it's been very troubling, but as is usual, it's never all bad. There's also some awesome stuff. Yeah. I did one of the most non-Jewish things I've ever done in my life on Saturday. I helped to slaughter a pig.
Right. I meant to ask you about that.
I helped to slaughter a pig, and so right now in the oven I have like a pork roast. Oh. I've never done this, so I'm kind of asking around, but yeah, it was pretty nasty, especially at the beginning, and it made me really think about Jesus's parable about the prodigal son living with the pigs. Ew. And then eating the leftovers. Like, pigs will eat anything. So I don't know what's left over. Like what? So like Jesus is using hyperbole to show like how awful this dude's life became, obviously. But I was just kind of reminded because pigs will eat anything. And to pigs, humans are food. Like pigs will eat a human. Like if pigs are hungry enough, they will attack you.
I think, what is it? Crash.
Was it in Crash?
Maybe that was there's a few movies where the bad guys feed the people to the pigs. Yeah. It's pretty gross.
But that's a real thing. Like, the dude, the farmer who was, he shot the pig and did the whole thing. It was nasty. But all that stuff is, he said, the pigs are curious right now because he was out there in the middle of them. He said, they're full. They're not hungry. So they're just more curious. He said, but if they were hungry, they would attack me. I would be food.
Oh, geez Louise.
And so,
which is why I guess when Dorothy fell in the pig pen, pig pen in Wizard of Oz,
he said they have no moral altruism in any sense. Like they will eat each other. They'll eat anything. And that's why they're unclean, right? That's why they are an unclean animal. Anyway, but all that to say is the fact that the dude was living, the prodigal son was living with the pigs, that his life is in danger. I was just thinking about putting a lot of that together while doing some gross things, but it was also at the same time, it was very fascinating. Like it was like being in biology class, like, because you kind of string the pig up and then you parse it out and do some stuff. And, there's a lot of biology involved, and it wasn't as bloody as you might think. Because once the blood drains out, it's not really bloody at all at that point. So anyway, so it was really interesting. Some people are probably just throwing up.
We've lost all of our vegetarian listeners. Talking about that reminds me of one of my favorite lines from The Simpsons, where Lisa says, "Dad, I'm gonna go vegetarian." He's like, "What does that mean, Lisa?" He's like, "Well, I'm not gonna eat meat." Like, no bacon? No. No pork chop? No. No barbecue? Dad, those are all the same animal. And he's like, oh yeah, this magical, mystical beast. It's one of my favorite clips. I was like, oh,
that's the best.
Well, so hopefully you got some of that magical, mystical meat
I did. So we'll see how it tastes later tonight or tomorrow. I'm like I said, I'm got some in the oven. I'm going to grill some up.
So for anybody hungry in the Atlanta area,
come on over. I've got plenty. Believe me. I've tried. I wasn't even there. I was there more for the experience and to learn some things. But in the end, there was so much meat that they were like, you have to take some of this home. And it was a lot. So I got to figure out something to do with it.
Well, you're driving through here in September, so.
Ooh. That's not a bad idea right there.
So we're talking today about, we're segueing very nicely. We've talked about Afghanistan, we've talked about pig killing, and now we're talking about a movie. But it's all sort of, I think it fits because you were out there, like you said, in the muck and the mire, and that's sort of what the protagonist, Benjamin Mee, did in We Bought a Zoo.
Yeah, there's all kind of animals, not really a farm. It was more, they're
right.
not cages,
you don't kill them and eat them.
You don't kill them and eat them.
At least not in the U.S. I think there's laws.
So yeah, We Bought a Zoo.
So Britt, I don't even remember who picked this one.
I think I mentioned that it was a good one. You had a couple options. And I said, We Bought a Zoo.
Back when I said, let's steer away from the 80s for a couple weeks.
At least one. No, I remember really enjoying We Bought a Zoo, and I really liked that movie. So
yeah, it was great. I hadn't seen it before. Even my wife said I had seen it before, but I didn't remember it at all. So
now Cameron Crowe, he rewrote the script and he directed the movie. I'm a sucker for adventure, for misfits, as we already know, and those sort of dreamers. Stories about dreamers are people who, Rudy and those sort of stories. You're like, you can't do that. Like, that's impossible. I'm a sucker for those sort of stories. So this kind of has that. And like I told Paul before we started, I said, this is basically Jerry Maguire with a zoo, because it's Cameron Crowe again. And he was like, what? And
it broke my brain a little. I'm not going to lie.
So it's a great flick. I really do like it a lot.
Yeah. So it's got Matt Damon. It's got Scarlett Johansson. She doesn't kill anybody. Came out in 2011, mixing up her and her Black Widow persona character there. And it starts with the kid, he's talking about his dad and all these crazy adventures that he's going on. And then it shifts and he says, my dad's been on all these adventures, but I'm not sure he's ready for this one.
He knew the ins and outs of strange and exotic adventure, backwards and forwards. But nothing prepared him for this one.
Come on, we're late, guys. Let's go. Come on. We're really late.
Dad, can you get my hair?
Yeah.
I'll just get one.
No, I want you to have eggs, man. We have time. You need the protein.
You don't have to.
Mama always gave me
Dad, you can read the label.
Ow!
You can read the label. These aren't gluten-free.
Will you do that?
I can't
Did
eat
anybody even
these.
say good morning? Hello, Benjamin Mee. Don't step on the... Hi, Sharon. No, I can't go hiking. It's just not a great time. Okay, thank you.
Where's our lunches?
What is on your feet?
Reindeer slippers.
Look, I'm the one who gets the emails about your lack of effort, man. Okay? You either know where the book is or you don't.
Dad, it's whatever. Look, I'll know it when I get to school.
You know what? Whatever is the laziest word of the 20th century, all right? I've had it with whatever. I don't want to hear it again in this century ever again. Whatever is over.
He says it all the time. He won't have anything left to say in this century.
I'm not letting you out of the car till I get a new word. You gotta focus, man. If you focused as much on your homework as you do on your artwork, you'd have it all. But as it is,
Dad, I finished the 7th tower.
you're gonna get an F.
That clip didn't sound like your house on every school morning ever, does it, Britt?
Not my house anymore. I only have one, and she usually gets up well. But for my wife, that would be more the conversations that my wife has, because my son is now in high school. She teaches high school, so she takes him with her in the morning. And he and I have to have some conversations later because of some things that he says. But no, that's definitely that relationship. for my wife in the morning, trying to get him going. So I love that adventure sort of idea, because Benjamin has been on all these amazing adventures, and it kind of goes through some, it's crazy, right? And throughout the movie, he says, I was a writer and an observer, which I thought was really an interesting statement, because what he was saying is that he used to tell these stories, but kind of from the outside. And now he's having to live this adventure from the inside. And it is a different experience. And this is one of the things we love about movies. One of the reasons we love movies is because we can sit there and crap is happening to other people, and we can sit back and it's not happening to me. And now sometimes it can emotionally affect us, but no one would want our wives to die. Like, no one would want that to happen to us, but we can sit, like, we'll pay money to sit in a movie theater and watch it happen to somebody else and learn from it and get and be entertained by it to some degree. I'm not saying we're entertained by people dying. I'm just saying, like, that's part of the story. Like, we want our protagonists to get into these. I don't know. We just did the Suicide Squad. So I think we were entertained by watching people die. So a little bit, just because the helicopter was chopping people and it was all CGI'd. It was all CGI. No humans were actually harmed in the making of the movie. That's a great excuse. It was all special effects. But that's why we love reading stories and watching these stories. Even if they're about other people, we can be inspired, but it's kind of happening. It's outside of us. And it's different when you live an adventure. You know, Benjamin Franklin said, either write something worth reading or live a life worth writing about. Like, do one or the other. Like, write something that's worth other people taking up their time to read, or live a life that's worth reading about. And I try to do both in my life, you know, slaughtering a pig. That's why I said yes to slaughtering the pig, helping to slaughter the pig. I'm like, I am a city boy. I've never had this opportunity. I cannot say no to this. It sounds awful, but okay, I'm in. I'm in. But, you know, I had to change things that I ate. I'm a picky eater, but you live overseas, you got to learn how to deal with some stuff. And I had bee sting acupuncture, and there's just all these things that I've just been there, and I said, okay, yes, you know, it's not immoral or anything. It's just a different culture. It's a different experience. Let's try it. And those are the kind of stories that stick with you. And those are the kind of adventures that mean something. And he had some sort of adventure, but now he's kind of been thrust into this other sort of adventure, which is grief. I think the main adventure that he goes through in this movie isn't really about the zoo. The main adventure that he's on is dealing with his grief and being there with his family, dealing with grief. That's really the adventure, which is why they don't spend a whole lot of time with her in the sick bed. Like, they don't spend a lot of time with that sort of drama. They really focus on the relationships, especially between he and his son, and how they are dealing with grief. And even the Scarlett Johansson character, what's her name? Kelly? Yeah. Like, even she's dealing with some grief. Right. Like, I'll tell you about a cage. I'll tell you about my marriage. Right. So she's dealing with some stuff. Right. And so people are dealing with some grief. And his brother, they make it funny, but it's like he misses his ex-wife or whatever. She left him or whatever. And so they're all grieving something, and they're having to deal with it and in some way. And that's really, the zoo is just the avenue for how they come to grips with living a new life. And that's interesting because you going back to what you were saying. Yeah, this movie is, hey, watch this father and his two kids deal with the loss of the wife and mother. Captivating catchphrase, isn't it? No, nobody's going to watch that. It's like, that sounds super depressing. But that is what happens. And it's really interesting because not just the fact that each one of those main characters was dealing with grief, but how they responded. Yeah. Like Duncan, who's played by Thomas Hayden Church. I just know him as Lowell from Wings.
Love
wow.
him.
Good job.
But he's an accountant. So how does he lost his girlfriend or wife or whatever. She left him. They broke up. He went adventure crazy, did all these crazy things. And now he manages his grief through control, through rationalization, through reason, right? He's
And
sort of
safety.
Yeah. Kelly, she now has responded to her grief and her loss with working like crazy. She lives with her mom. She doesn't go out. She works all the time. She's lost her life for her work. It's interesting because I think in a lot of ways, a lot of men in this situation would pursue adventure to deal with their grief, to deal with that loss. But that was Benjamin's life. His life was adventure. So his new adventure is being home and dealing with the chaos and crazy and trying to figure it out. And trying to figure out, like he says at one point in the movie, I wish I could have a conversation with my wife of how to let her go.
Man.
Because she's everywhere.
That was a cry moment. That's a cry moment for me. I'm going to cry right now because we have all had that feeling. If you have dealt with grief, you have felt that. I wish I could talk to the person who had just died, how to get over them, how to deal with this. I wish I could do that. And you can't. Like sometimes you have dreams where like the person who's dead is in there in your dream and they're talking with you. And my mentor is one of the ones that I've had the main dream about. And he's just talking with me like it's just normal. And he's still around and nothing has changed. And I'm like, dude, everything changed. Like you died and your wife mourned and your kids mourned. And it was traumatic, And he was just there. And this movie really reminds me of a lot of that because every time he thinks about his wife, she's just smiling at him. She's just, like he remembers that person. And that's really where he has to come to grips. That's the lie he has to get rid of and the truth. But for Scarlett Johansson, the cage was part of what she had to get over. That grief of her marriage, that grief of the loss of her ideals, I'm sure, with the zoo, with the animals, with the things, with people leaving, right? Everybody at the zoo, by the way, none of them believe this dude is going to stick it out. Like they're like, he's not going to be here long. So there's those sort of expectations that she has to deal with, but she's come back around to people are what's important. So there's just a lot of really great moments. Or his brother, they're at the coffee shop or something, and he's trying to convince him not to buy the zoo. And I thought that was a really interesting moment because the brother was all about safety. Like, this is not safe. And he says the line, I'm going to see if I can find it. He says, you are going to spend our father's inheritance to buy a broken down zoo. And I wrote that down and I underlined it because that's what we have to do with our Father's inheritance in heaven. That's what we do. We take our Father's inheritance, the kingdom, heaven, and we go into people's lives and we buy their life. We take the hopeless and we literally go into, and it seems risky and it's dirty and it's messy and it's risky. And that's the adventure. That part really spoke to me because with our Father's inheritance, that's what we do. With his wealth, with all the wealth of heaven, we spend it on the lives of people to fix the broken, to heal. Pure religion is to be with the fatherless and the widow, right? And here we have the motherless and the widowed, right? I mean, but we have something similar in this sort of situation of where he's using his father's inheritance and it seems like he's wasting it, but he's not. And people are not a waste, and broken things aren't a waste because adventures are amazing. Anyway, I just love that scene because that's what we deal with. That the pull is to safety, right? Yeah. Don't risk. Don't spend it all. Don't give it all. Don't do that. Hold something back. Keep safe. Guard your heart. We do all this stuff in Christianity even. And we have to deal with that. In order to have story 2, if we want to have a story of adventure and awe and mystery and miracle, we can't listen to the safety arguments. We can't listen to, but that's not safe, but that's not what everybody else does. That's the kind of argument the brother Duncan was making.
Yeah. Alan shared some of it in the Somewhere in Time podcast episode. And I'm not going to get into the details. It's his story, but story 1 is basically, you can sort of depend on yourself, depend on process, depend on knowledge, wisdom, strategy, planning, whatever it is, and you can pursue it. And it's just sort of gray and there, right? And that's story 1. No mystery, no suspense, no surprise, formula.
No miracle.
A
no
plus
miracle.
B equals C. Exactly. Story 2 is one of mystery, where it doesn't make sense. You're like, but God is in it. And God's in both, by the way. God is in both. But one, there's a greater dependence, a greater intimacy with God, because Benjamin Mee, the reason he was moving out of the house was because everything reminded him of his wife, and he's trying to cope. He's trying to move on. He's trying to not see her in everything he does. So he's like, I got to get out of the house. Because we think that, right? We think, the problem will be fixed with a new job. It'll be fixed. My kids, once they get to school, I'll be able to handle it. Once they go to college, I'll be able to handle it. Once I get the new car, once I get the new whatever, once I'm married, once I'm not married. We think that our lives and our happiness depend on if the
situation
right
could change. Yeah.
But the problem is we carry our own broken ass into it. And that's what he ends up doing. He walks into the situation. I thought it'd get better when I moved here.
Yeah.
And it did for a while, but now I go to Lowe's, I go to the Target, and I can't walk down certain aisles because she loved blueberry Pop-Tarts.
Yeah. Yeah. For story 2, you're going to be asked to make decisions that seem strange. So story 1 is what everyone else would do. Story 2 is what God's asking you to do. And I wrote a whole book on this, right? Say yes, right? And story 2 is doing what God has asked you to do, which is going to look crazy. Jesus talked about being born again, and you must be born of the Spirit, not of the flesh, but you must be born of the Spirit. And people who are of the Spirit are like the wind. You don't know where the wind is coming from. You don't know where it's going. So are the people who follow the Spirit or who live by the Spirit. And I was talking with a guy one time who was, let's just say he was very, very intelligent, very academic, and he had some sort of theological, philosophical degree. And we were having a biblical discussion, and I mentioned this, and he said, it doesn't say that. The Holy Spirit is like that. It never says the people are like that. And I literally opened the Bible and I showed him. And I says, no, the people are going to be like the wind. They're not going to make sense to everybody else. There's an unseen force guiding what they do, but you don't know where it comes from. You don't even know where it's going. There's a mystery to that, to everyone else. It really shook him because he's like, no, that's the Holy Spirit, not people. And I said, well, wait a minute. But even if you agree that's the Holy Spirit, if we live by the Holy Spirit, won't we do that too?
Yeah.
And this academic intellectual guy was shaken. That rocked his world. He didn't want to look crazy to his peers. He wanted to look everything nice and put together, right? I'm reading into it, but that's that's story 2.
Yeah.
And that's the adventure that God wants to bring us on. And it is as much or more internal than it is external.
That's I love that. We focus so much on all these stories, focus on the externals, but they really reflect an internal process.
Amen.
And what we see with story 2, and frequently in the New Testament, when Jesus shows up, he asks people questions.
Yep.
And one of his most frequent questions is, what would you like me to do? And we get these story 1s, story 2s. God is present equally. God's not like, well, you picked wrong. I'm out of here. See ya, loser. Celtic Christians used to call the Holy Spirit the wild goose. And it's like chasing the wild goose. And it is scary. It's exactly what Benjamin Mee did here of pursuing what he felt was right. He followed his heart because that's sort of all you have. And there is no guarantee of success. There is no guarantee of a miracle. And one of the recent messages I heard, and I can't even remember who said it, but when we're pursuing the miraculous, it looks ridiculous until it looks miraculous. Moses, what are you doing lifting up your hands by the Red Sea? Oh, wait, what's going on with the water? Why would Jesus show up and, he says, roll away the stone? Well, that looks kind of crazy. He's going to stink.
Dude, he's been in there for a couple of days.
This is ridiculous. Lazarus, come out. Oh, well, that changes things. Things look ridiculous. And in this movie, Benjamin Mee looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Until the end, when it looks miraculous.
Again, you brought it out in the beginning about how he was seeking his situation to change what was an internal problem.
Right.
And he had to deal with that internal problem, even to fix the external one. He had to fix the internal as well. And those are the journeys that Jesus and God take us on. Because you mentioned the Red Sea with Moses. Mm-hmm. God led them to the Red Sea. There was a way to go to the promised land over land. There was a way to do that. And Moses probably knew that way. He was a fairly educated dude, and he grew up in Pharaoh's household. So he probably knew that. But God led him into a position where he was going to have the Red Sea on one end and the Egyptian army on the other. God literally led them like they looked like idiots. Because where are you going to go? Like
what have you done to us?
Like, what have you? But what did it expose? It exposed their faith or lack of it in the moment. It exposed, we might as well die. It would have been better to be left in Egypt. Let's go back to story one. Yeah. At least when we were slaves, they fed us or whatever. That keeps happening with the Israelites all the way throughout. But you know what happened with the Israelites? It said, the Bible says over 40 years, their clothes didn't wear out. Their sandals didn't wear out. They had food every day. Like they were living a miracle, even in God's judgment for 40 years, because they didn't, go into the promised land when he told them the first time. Even though they rejected that word and he rejected them for a whole generation, they were still living the miraculous with bread raining down from heaven and all of this stuff. Like they were still living in the miraculous. And that is what God is calling us to, because those are amazing stories and they are full of scary moments and grief. And in this story, the center of it is the grief.
And the miraculous does show up because here in the middle of the movie, they're out of money. Benjamin's out of money. The zoo's out of money, but they need to spend $100-something thousand to fix and get it ready to pass inspection. And he discovers a sweatshirt that he thought they had given away because it reminded his daughter of her mother. And on a whim, because he wanted to feel close to her, he put it on. And in the pocket was a note, something about a deposit box. Mm-hmm. And he goes and looks to see what's in the deposit box. And then he goes to find his brother to say, his brother's an accountant. So he's like, what is this? What has happened here? And so in the deposit box are both account slips and a letter from Catherine.
Do you know what she did for you?
I think so.
She knew exactly what you would do. You'd make a bad investment, need to start over, and have to have a cushion. This is your cushion. $84,000, man.
Oh my God.
$84,000. She's still looking out for you, man. She calls it your circus money.
Circus money, yeah.
Oh, this next part's kind of hurtful.
Yeah.
Says listen to your heart, not your brother.
I know, I read that. Yeah. She loved you, man.
She used 3 exclamation marks.
She loved you.
I can see why you still carry the torch.
Yeah, but with $84,000, we'll cut a few corners, but I know we can make the inspection.
No, Benji. Here's what she's saying. You're free. You realize that? Listen. Benji. You did it, man. You went to the circus. You changed Dylan and Rosie's lives. They're gonna have those memories forever. But staying here and going down in flames, that's not what Catherine wanted. She wanted you to be free. This money is your ticket out. And if you won't listen to your brother, the accountant, then listen to your wife, who clearly planned a financial future for you.
Yeah, I love that scene. I love all the scenes with his brother, by the way, because you're right. He is an amazing character actor, number one, and he's got comedy timing. But I also love how by the end of the movie, his brother is part of the dream too.
Yeah.
And that's what has to happen, man. I mean, in order to bring other people into the dream, you have to get involved. And the brother continually tries to get Benjamin into safety because that he loves him. He's not doing it to be mean. He's not a villain. He looks at his brother and he says, man, this guy has traveled the world and killer bees and blah, 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 blah. He's done all this stuff, but he's got a grieving family. Let me help take care of them. But the brother in his love is saying, man, don't risk everything in this. And a zoo, like it's broken down zoo and no one's loved this thing. And he just keeps going over how this is not safe. And he tries to bring Benjamin back into what he sees as safety. And I love the turn by the end of the movie when his brother shows up with fish for the bear or whatever. And his brother shows up and now he's risking things. Now he's caught up in it. And that doesn't happen when we give up. The story has to continue. And when we're brought into those moments and those stories of saying yes, and there are going to be dark times or it's going to be time to quit. And we think we're going to quit and everybody around us thinks we're going to quit like they did with Benjamin several times in the movie. But this scene also really goes down into one of the lies that Benjamin believes, which is he has to figure out a way to live without his wife. And she keeps showing up. And he's got to figure this out by the end of the movie. He's got to figure out that he can never live without her. And he starts to figure that out as the movie goes on, because the sweatshirt shows up and the money shows up. Like she's always going to be a part of his life. And that's a lie that he believes. Like he's trying to get her out of his life. She's dead. She's gone. She's not gone.
Right.
She's still there. And he's got to figure that out. And that's his internal journey. The zoo is just a way to get there. God takes us on these journeys just to deal with what's in our hearts. That's what he does. He takes us on these adventures because in the end, he's after what's in our hearts, what we believe about him, what we believe about others, what we believe about ourselves. And they are crazy adventures sometimes, but that's why he's doing it. That's why he leads us to the Red Sea, where we're going to be stuck between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. And we start freaking out. And he's like, yeah, I know. I brought you here. Like I knew the whole time this was going to happen. And he knew the whole time, and we know that. And in a movie, it's safe because we're sitting on our couch and I'm eating, mesquite barbecue chips and it's fine until I realize that my story has been like this. There have been times I wanted to give up. There have been times I was like, this ain't worth it. I'm done. I'm out. And God reminds me, you remember when I did this? Remember when I did that? It's not over. Just keep going. Just keep going, man. It's all right. Because he's trying to do something internal.
And to me, that scene was a reminder of God's provision. Like you were just saying.
Yeah.
I knew the Egyptians were coming. I brought you here for a reason. I wanted to show you how awesome I was. And that's in this movie. That's what it was it painted a picture of how awesome Catherine was. She knew Benjamin so well.
Yep.
That she prepared, and she called it circus money. She was so close. It wasn't zoo money. It was circus money. But she had that set up, and even knew his brother so well that she said, listen to your heart and not your brother. As we've talked about, you get a choice. Are you going to do story one? Sell the zoo. They're going to put the animals to sleep. The zoo people will find a new job. Just let them go. Or story two, which is, I don't know how to make it work. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm all in.
I've been an adventure addict my whole life, with no big regard for cost. With no regard for cost. Basically, I was just an observer and a writer, but this is my first real adventure. And I just want to say that it's been the best one of all because it's personal. And thanks to my Catherine, the money came through. So, I don't know what you've heard, but I am able to say, though I don't have a lot, I do have enough to get us by. And if you stick with me, I will give this everything, but I will need everything from you, and we're going to reopen this zoo. It is the best job in the world, and it's going to take everything to make it work. So don't give up on our adventure.
Well, that's good enough for me.
Me too.
Done, man.
Circus money, man. Our adventure is just beginning.
That's not what I meant.
I know.
That was such an amazing scene. So here's why I love these movies, why I'm a sucker for these movies. I believe with all my heart that we were born to be a part of an adventure that takes everything. That we want that. Every one of us wants to be part of an adventure that takes everything we have, where we risk everything. We all want that. Every person. I believe that with all my heart. And it's so hard to do because it feels so unsafe. And it is unsafe,
right,
to this world.
The outcome's not guaranteed.
The outcome is not guaranteed unless it's with God. And there is one part of that outcome that's guaranteed. All things work together for good. Not some things, not half the things, not the things we like, not the things we don't like. All things, my mistakes, my successes, when I do it right, when I screw it up, it says all things work together for good, but there's a condition. That's not everybody. It doesn't work together for good for every person. It only works together for good for those who love God and are called according to story 2, according to his purpose, which is to spend our inheritance on the broken. That's our purpose. If we'll do it, then all things work together for good. Then we infuse every act with eternity. One of my favorite verses is, if you give a cup of cold water to a prophet because he's a prophet, this is Jesus, you receive a prophet's reward. Now, the cup of cold water is immaterial. It's not just that you're being nice and the guy's thirsty. Jesus says it has to come in the context of you understand this person's spiritual reality and you are ministering to this person because of that spiritual reality. And when you do that, your equality happens. You guys are connected on a level that goes beyond this world, and you get the same reward as a prophet. That's mind-blowing to me, unless we realize all things work together for good, even giving a cup of cold water for those who have their mind transformed and realize they love God and they're called according to his purpose, and they're going to live story 2. And jumping is scary. We'll get to the jumping in a moment, but that's what he has to do. That's what he has to get through. He has to get through learning that he will never leave his wife, even though his wife has died. And that's really hard, because when somebody dies, grief is a funny thing, man. When somebody dies, you don't expect people to die. Even when you expect people to die, you don't expect them to die, right? I mean,
people are like, oh, if you die.
Right.
Well, no, that's not an if, it's a win. It's always a win. We're all going to die. Eventually.
It's a win.
Yeah.
Which is illogical that we are surprised when people die. Like, it happens to every person, but we're surprised. And it throws all of our security into chaos when somebody dies, because
we have no control.
We have no control. And all of a sudden, this thing that in our brain we thought was going to be there forever isn't there anymore. And again, he had to realize that it was still there, but just on a different level. And I love that thing where he's with his daughter in the bed, and he says, are you forgetting what she looks like? Yeah. Well, what do? Catch her spirit. But the Bible literally says that we have a cloud of witnesses watching what we do. Like,
cheering us on.
They're cheering us on. Lay aside every weight. Come on, man. Choose story 2. I chose story 2, or I wish I would have chosen story 2. Choose it, please. They're egging us on. They're cheering us on. And he had to find that reality, that my mentor, it's funny that we're talking about this movie today. So my mentor's daughter sent me a picture today. She didn't know we were talking about this, right? And she sends me this picture. She says, I was cleaning out drawers and found this treasure. And it's a picture of a letter that somebody wrote. It was Larry's wife, Alice. And so basically, quick backstory, we were looking for a place to go minister over spring break. We were in Korea, and my mentor had passed, Larry Trammell had passed. And I was talking with people, communicating with people, and Alice, his wife, his widow, was like, there are people who are contacting us for Larry to come visit them in all these countries, and Larry's gone. And what do we do? So I said, well, give those people to me. He said, okay. So I went to India, and God led the way, blah, 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 prophetic and all this stuff. And I get to India. Oh, I was standing in front of 130 pastors, by the way, who lived in villages and ministered to the poor, right? And I'm this young, early 30s dude standing in front of these guys. And I had written some blog stuff about it. And this is what I say. Alice quoted me in this letter. The weight of the moment was immense. I felt as one with much to learn, not much to teach. Quite frankly, I don't know if I've ever missed Larry Trammell more. I felt like he would know what to say. His heart is what these pastors need to hear. Larry would have blessed them and taught them awesome mysteries of God. As I was on the brink of tears, I realized God didn't send Larry. God sent me. And so I spoke. Because you're not going to feel good enough. When you do story 2, you're not going to feel like you have it all together. You're not going to feel like you got anything figured out, to be quite honest. But I've been in those moments where you realize Larry's always with me. My grandfather, my grandma, these people that I love, these people who have had such an impact on my life, spiritually, emotionally, they're always with me. And he had to realize that. So that was the first lie. That's the main lie. And then there's kind of a lie 1B that he had to learn, but we can get to that later.
One of the lines in there really struck me, and I wrote it down as we were listening to it. I don't have a lot, but what I have is enough.
Mm.
And even as you were talking about that story about being in front of the pastors and stuff, is like, I don't have a lot. I don't have a lot of experience. I feel like I need to learn. All I have is what Larry would tell me. I don't have a lot. boy with 2 loaves, two fish. I don't remember the numbers now. The
Yeah,
loaves
good.
and the fish kid, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a lot, but you can have what I do have.
Right.
And God says that's enough.
That's it.
He doesn't ask for much. He just asks for everything. But whatever you have is enough, because if you needed more, he would have provided it.
Yeah.
If in this movie, if Benjamin needed $150,000, there would have been $150,000. 84,000 was enough.
And I love that moment, by the way, because it shows the heart of a child in the kingdom when the inspector guy, who I don't remember the actor's name, but he is hilarious. He's been in so many movies and sitcoms and things. Very funny guy, but he plays the Ferris. He plays the inspector guy. And he comes up with this big list of things that they have to do. He's like, how much is this going to cost? And the guy says, $1.50. And little Rosie goes, well, I got that. And I love that. That's
and
the heart of
Benjamin's
the
like,
kingdom.
go get it. We're going to need it all.
We're going to need it all. And, but see, here's the thing about giving it all is that it is not enough. All it takes is you giving it all. And that's why it feels like such a risk. But with God, he can multiply that to infinity. You know, God's like, why do I need your bulls and rams? I have the cattle on 1,000 hills. Like the point isn't that you killed something and gave it to me. That's not what we're doing here. Like that was the temple in the old system, right? That's not, the point isn't a zoo. That's not what we're really about here. The point isn't coffee with the coffee ministry. I wrote something in an email one time, and you know, the owners keeps repeating it back to me. I wrote an email. It's, you know, we have this great coffee and it's blah, 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 blah. And it does all this stuff. And I say, but it's not about coffee. It's about the people that we touch. It's about the people. It's about people. It's about people. It's about this. It's about truth. It's not about coffee. And we want to do a good job with coffee in the zoo. We want to do a good job with the story and with excellence, whatever God's given us. But in the end, God's after something so much deeper than an act.
I'm going to say this one more time, buddy. I like the animals, but I love the humans. You do something for the right reasons, nothing can stop you.
I love it. There's a theme running through it that it really was about the people. It was about what's going on. And that's part of what Benjamin had to learn. Benjamin was trying to distract himself with another adventure.
Right.
But the real adventure was reconnecting with his son. That was the real adventure. That's what he had to learn. That's what he had to learn. That's what he had to learn how to do. And he had to get past his own fears. He had to get past the crap that his son was doing and saying. And he had to stop being offended every time his son messed up. Like he had to get past that fight. He had to fight past all that stuff so he could reconnect with his son and deal with his grief, and they could grieve together.
What I wrote, like one of the very first things I wrote, and it came out in the speech clip. This is the best job ever, he said. Our biggest adventures sometimes begin in our darkest trauma.
Yeah.
Because like you mentioned, the zoo wasn't the adventure. The people. The people were an adventure. And that was where the investment is going. Because when you invest in people, that seed does not go out, does not return void.
That's right.
Because that's what he was doing. He was investing in people. And then when the tiger died, got sicker and sicker, God took Benjamin back into the wounds that he suffered watching the same thing happen with his wife.
Benjamin?
Hey, look, I'm feeling a real lack of privacy right now. Like maybe we're all a bit in each other's pockets.
Can't you see his legs? He's suffering, man. He's in a lot of pain. I can't stand to watch it. I know him.
Yeah, I know
see
him.
it. Hey, he's in so much pain. They can't tell you, but they show you. They show you.
Well, hang on. What is all the cheering about then? He's okay.
It's going to happen.
He's better.
It's going to happen.
Okay, don't repeat it to me.
It's going
like I'm
to
a
happen.
kid.
You've never done this before. You don't know how this goes.
I know exactly how this goes.
And I invite you to tell me about that sometime. But this is a rookie mistake. I've been with him for 13 years. You can't see how selfish this is to extend this? Come on. Come on, you're too smart not to.
I'm saying we just let him live for a couple more weeks. Get him some medicine and invest in a little bit of hope.
No, I can't stand by and watch this happen. I'm not gonna do it.
Well, it's not up to you.
It's gonna happen.
You know the right thing to do, but so many times the right thing to do feels so painful.
Man, I love that scene. And Scarlett Johansson in that scene where she keeps saying it's going to happen. And he's like, stop talking to me like I'm a child. And she's like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And he was trying to keep it from happening. And man, Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. John 16:33. It is a promise. We don't like that promise. We don't like the promise that trouble will happen. Now, you get to the second part of the promise. We like that part. But the first part of the promise is just as true. In this world, you will have trouble. He says, but take heart. Have courage. 20 seconds. Have courage because I have overcome the world. Like, not just the trouble, the world that the trouble is in. He's overcome the very world that the trouble is in. Like, that's bigger. And yet the trouble is going to happen. The chaos, as Alan Arnold would say, the chaos is going to enter the story at some point, and it's going to happen. And what are you going to do when it happens?
And before we transition into our conversation about 20 seconds of courage, I think it's important to recognize, because we spent about 30 minutes before this podcast talking about what's happening in Afghanistan. And as Peter says, the sufferings that are going on with all the brothers and sisters around the world.
And Muslims. And I mean, there's all sorts of innocent people dealing with stuff.
In this world, there will be trouble.
Yep.
It's a guarantee. Death and trouble, right? And how do we face that? And we were asking ourselves, how do we do this podcast for a movie that's dealing with the death of a wife and mother? It's a pretty lighthearted-ish movie with some heavy moments, but it doesn't feel heavy and dark. How do we talk about this movie when there's so much darkness in the world? But I think that's where we're landing is, in this world, there will be trouble. In this world, you will face the greatest pain and greatest trauma you will ever experience. And our job is to remember that Jesus has overcome, that God is not surprised. God was not surprised by COVID. God is not surprised by what's going on in Afghanistan. He is not shocked that there is sexual trafficking and a higher number of slavery in this world than at any time in history. In this world, you will have trouble. And how do we respond? Do we respond with anger at God and say, how can you let this happen? Or do we enter in to those painful parts? This is going to happen.
Yeah.
The suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces hope, and hope does not disappoint.
Hope does not disappoint.
Romans 5.
Yeah.
Helpful, really helpful. Because when I go through those things, I was like, this hurts. This sucks. I don't want to go through this. And any moment we can say, you know what? I'm going for safety. I'm going for comfort.
Yep.
I'm going for a little bit of relief of the trouble. And throughout the movie, Benjamin is an example of a guy who looks at trouble and jumps in face first. It doesn't matter if it's engaging with the staff at the zoo when he has no idea what's going on. It doesn't matter if it's his son who's yelling at him and he's yelling back and saying, no, you misheard me. You're believing a lie.
Yep.
I want to teach you to shave. And God can do that. God's just like him. When we're yelling at him, saying, where were you? You must hate me because you're letting this happen. He's saying, you're believing a lie. I love you. Walk with me in this. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It may not be okay right now. And that is going to lead to That's why we need to take heart. That's why we need to be courageous.
And go to God to see what he wants, what he's after. One of my favorite parts of the movie is when he shows the poster that he made and that he changed the logo to his son's drawing. And he says, don't you know by now, I'm your biggest fan. And that's what God says to me when I feel like a failure and, you know, the upteenth publisher has rejected a manuscript that I think is cool. And I go, oh, and God's like, man, I love it. I think it's awesome. And you're like, no one else does. And he's like, man, don't you get it? I'm your biggest fan. I don't hate you. Like the lie he believed was that his dad was ashamed of him. And he had reason to be ashamed of him. The dude had stolen money and like, you know, he had got kicked out and he'd been given extra chances. And we usually do 3 strikes, but your kid had 4. And, you know, like, like he had been acting out of his pain and his dad had every reason to be ashamed. And his dad was legitimately angry at times, right? Trying to like, and once he saw the pain beyond the outward show of it, of acting out, he was able to enter the pain with his son because he had the same pain, right? He was able to enter that and into that with his son and speak truth. Like you said, I'd love to teach you how to shave. I'm not ashamed of you. I'm your biggest fan.
The problem wasn't a lack of love from the father.
Nope.
It was a lack of invitation from the son. And how often do we shut out God?
Yes.
Because we are hurt.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we're angry.
Yeah.
And we're yelling. And again, I keep going back to Afghanistan where there are believers, there are people there who are facing imminent martyrdom because our lives don't end when the body ends.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain sense of relief of, oh man, if I could just die and not have to deal with all this crap anymore and just be in the kingdom, like fully and completely, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But there's still work to be done.
Yeah.
We have to enter into pain.
Yeah.
And sorrow and trauma and offer light in the darkness.
Amen. Well, that's exactly what Paul says in one of his letters. The Apostle Paul says in one of his letters, he said, I'd rather be dead, which sounds morbid, but he's like, I'd rather be fully with Jesus and see him face to face. I would rather be that. But if I'm here for you.
Right.
In other words, if I'm still here, that means God has a purpose and God has a plan. And that purpose and that plan is to love others and serve others and to lead others and influence others and impact others for the kingdom. That's really what my purpose is. And yes, that means entering into pain. I love the way you said it, entering into the pain and the sorrow because it's going to happen. And you said it earlier too about a God who suffers. And that's something that we always have to remember. Jesus wept, even though he knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, he still wept. He suffers with us too. He's not up there expecting us not to have any emotion about the whole thing. He understands. He was like us. He weeps and he enters the pain with us, but he still raised him from the dead, right? He entered the pain and validated the pain, but he still raised him from the dead. And the story didn't end with the death of Jesus either. It doesn't end there. And the story didn't end we bought the zoo all the times he wanted to quit and he ran out of money. The story didn't end. And that's why we love these stories. It reminds us of that.
The story doesn't end with the death of Catherine.
No.
It doesn't end with the death of the tiger. If you have the courage to go on.
What happened with you and Lily?
I don't know. I guess I didn't listen to something she told me or something. I mean, I liked her. It's like you embarrass yourself if you say something, and you embarrass yourself if you don't.
I like it when you talk.
Sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. Just literally 20 seconds of just embarrassing bravery. And I promise you, something great will come of it.
Do you remember what you told me when I was a kid?
You only have to be courageous for 20 seconds.
It has guided me my entire life.
All right, ladies first. Where are we going?
Now, hang on. So, okay. Stop. She was right there. This is the moment where both of you became a possibility.
I love that you're telling stories again.
This is the story before the story. This is where you and you begin. Because this is where I met your mom. She was sitting right there in that chair. Hang on.
Hey, so I was walking by and I literally stopped like this, just stopped and went, oh my God, that is
Hope
the
you
most
enjoyed
beautiful
it. I hope
woman
you join
I've
us next
ever
time
seen
here
in
on
my
the Men at the
entire
Movies
life.
podcast.
But I've never done anything like this. I'd never gone and talked to a total stranger before, but she was right there. And so I thought to myself, 20 seconds, right? Go.
Now I'm in the restaurant. And I'm terrified. Thinking about leaving. I can actually touch her. She's right there. She still hasn't seen me. And I still have 15 seconds of courage left. I'm going for it. Bravery. Here's what I said. I said, excuse me. Why would an amazing woman like you even talk to someone like me?
Why not?
Why not? And when Kelly asked him at the very beginning, why would you buy a zoo? His response was, why not? Because somebody took a chance on me. And somebody took a chance on you. And Jesus loved you so much that he's like, I can't live without you. I'm coming down so that you can know me. You're dead without me. And I don't want that. And the beautiful thing was you heard her voice because as he's telling the story, she appeared because stories make things real.
Yep. A couple of stories. I'm trying to make it quick because I don't want to make it too long, but a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine from high school passed away. She had just turned 49 or she was about to turn 49. And she had had some health problems and I didn't know about. And she had kind of kept off of Facebook and stuff. She'd had a hard life, but she was our class president and she passed away. Her name was Christy. And I went to her funeral on Sunday, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. And we cried and it was hard. And one of her friends gave an amazing gospel message, by the way. It was really good. And then we all went out to dinner. All my friends from high school that were there, we went out to dinner. And you know what we did? We told stories about Christy. We told stories about high school. You know why we did that? Because she's real again. We do that. She was real again. And I do it too. I do it all the time. Talk about Larry. I talk about my grandma. I talk about people who have passed on, but they're not gone. I can tell stories about them, especially if they were believers. You know, they have passed something on to me. You know, I didn't grow up in a vacuum. You know, I was given something by legacy from, you know, people who went before me and are now cheering me on, you know. And so I just love that. And the whole thing about the 20 seconds of bravery. If you're going to live story 2, you have to do this. If you're going to live story 2 that we've been talking about, a story of mystery and sometimes mayhem and miracle and awe and wonder and all of that stuff and purpose. If you're going to live that story, you're going to have to jump. You're going to have to jump. So for one of my friends' bachelor parties in Korea, we went bungee jumping. And it's the first time I'd ever gone. I always wanted to go bungee jumping. And I get up there, and I had been talking trash for weeks. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to get to the top. And when I jump, I'm going to be like Superman. I'm going to jump. And I got all the way up there and my body froze. And instead of jumping, my knee, like someone had this on film, by the way. I don't know if it's still on film somewhere, but back then, they had this I'm old, this camcorders, but they had this on film somewhere. And it was the weakest thing you could possibly imagine. I didn't jump. My knees buckled and I fell. It was all I could do just to fall off of the tower, much less jump. But once I fell, somewhat controlled falling, it was the most amazing experience. I mean, you're flying through the air. Now your brain knows you're connected, right? Like my brain knew I was connected. Like it was very safe. I mean, it all kind of harnesses and all sorts of things. We'd seen other people do it, very professional. But still, when I fell and I'm hurtling towards the ground, my brain is like, you're an idiot. You just jumped to your death.
You're going to die.
Everything in me was like, I'm dead. But then the bungee caught and I slowed down. And for the next 30 seconds, as I'm bouncing around, it was joy. It was joy. But I had to get past that. And God was teaching me that's what faith is like. Faith is knowing that he's got you.
Yeah.
But when you jump, everything in you is like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But you have to have that 20 seconds of courage. Now, if I'm going on to the story, we went bungee jumping again. And the second time I did it, I jumped like Superman. It was awesome. It was amazing. And no one filmed that, by the way. I just want to put that out there. No one filmed. You just have to take my word for it. And I took these guys from the military that was in the ministry I was a part of, and we went and I talked about faith, and it was this amazing time, and they made a t-shirt, and it was such an amazing time, and everyone was so encouraged. And then I went one last time. It was about 2 or 3 weeks before we left Korea. So we had been in Korea for 4 years, and we were moving back to America. And I got to the top. And something in me said, you don't have anything left to prove. Why are you jumping? Why are you jumping again? And God said, you're going back to America as a missionary. I had learned how to rocket in Korea as a missionary. My wife and I were awesome. And we took Micah everywhere with us. And God's like, okay, well, now that you're comfortable, go do this. And what God showed me is that living by faith is constantly jumping, learning how to jump all over again, because he's strengthening your faith. And literally, I stood up there for so long. My friends were like, dude, are you okay? Like, everything all right? And I said, no. And like, literally, I was having a moment with God up there where God was giving me courage and saying, it's going to be like jumping again. When you go back to America to be a missionary, it's going to be just like jumping all over again. And you're just going to have to keep jumping. There's going to be more and more moments where you have to jump. And that's why I love that 20 seconds of courage thing, because that is the key to living like the wind. And that's the way Jesus lived, man. And that's the way the Spirit inspires us. And I just love that whole 20 seconds of courage thing, because he's right. At the end of that with God, man, there's something amazing, but it feels terrifying in the middle of it.
So thank you for joining us on this episode. As we discussed, we bought a zoo. The big question is, what stories do you want to tell? Because you've got to live the stories that you want to tell. And if you want to tell interesting stories, you're going to have to make interesting choices.
Man.
Before we close out, I would encourage you, if you want to figure out a way to help those in Afghanistan or around the world who are sort of under it. My wife and I, we support Preemptive Love. Their mission is to go into places that most people are running away from. And so they're planning some help to not just as you mentioned, the missionaries in Afghanistan, but the people of Afghanistan.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what religion. If you're in need, they're going to help you. Check those out. I'll put the link or the resources on our website. Visit our website. I'll put links to all the stuff, all the quotes and stuff that we talked about. That's minutethemovies.com/podcast. And if you want to jump out on a ledge and help us out and partner with us, visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/minutethemovies.
Something we didn't talk about, but it's really fun when you get to jump with people, when people jump with you.
Yeah.
And that happened in the movie. And that happens with us as Paul and I, and I have with other experiences as well. That's always a great moment.
So thank you for joining us. That's been Paul McDonald and Britt Mooney talking about We Bought a Zoo. Hope you join us next week here on the Minute the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?